Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you with my co-host, David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Thank you for being here, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you. And it is always great to be here with you all. And we greet you with the love and the honor of the infinite creator. And we continue to pray each and every day that each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the blessings from the universe. And I got to say that Robert's been wanting to do that. He tried to do that last week, and it wasn't my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday. Thank you very much, honey.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy
Sing along.
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
There you go. We got the balloons and the confetti stuff. Woo! We got the stuff going on in the for Howard Marty.
And the confetti.
Yes. Woo! Hot diggity dog. Anyway, there we go. But
Well, thank you. I had just about an hour and a half ago, my friend that has been, taking me to the hospital when I had my heart attack and, been keeping an eye on me over the years. And he brought his 4 children over here, and they brought with them a big pan of still warm, fresh pears in a pear cobbler, and then put ice cream in them. And so these 2 girls and 2 boys, and the one boy still in the carrier, but they all got out and gave me a big hug, and they loved Duggar, and so they got to pet Duggar for a few minutes and run around in the yard, and to me that's very special. That to get hugs on your birthday at my age, I talked with my sister yesterday, and she was like, those hugs go a long way, and I was like, yeah, sister, they do. But so he brought his family over, and I got hugs from all of them, and that was a surprise, but very nice. And then my next door neighbors, which most folks know, Miss Sheila, she comes in often on my channel, and they brought over a great big, it's a 8x8 pan full of banana cream pudding.
Wow.
And so it's like, boy, I got dessert to last me to next week. So anyway, and on Saturday, my other friends came by out of nowhere and gave me a big hug and dropped off some donuts for my birthday cake.
Nice.
So it has been very simple but very nice, and I appreciate it all. I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And thank you, Robert, for my balloons and everything. If I'd have known, I'd have wore a hat or something.
I figured you weren't expecting. I had it all sitting over here in the corner.
I knew you had something up your sleeve, but I just didn't know what. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's a good to have a surprise. Surprise! Happy birthday, yes. So a few trips around the sun for sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So what can you tell us with your infinite knowledge that you have learned? Some wise words for us?
Never give up.
Never give up.
Never give up.
Never give up. It's a good one.
As many of you probably know, these last few years with 2 heart attacks and other issues, back surgery and all that, never give up. Just don't. No matter how bad or how nasty it might look, don't give up. Just keep slugging,
Yep.
And the other thing I would add is that when you need help, ask the creator.
Mhm.
Ask your angels and your spirit guides to help you, and believe it. Because
Yeah.
there had been too many times in my life I kept slugging, but I was like, "Oh, please help me," and they did. So when you believe it, it can be there. And so, keep slugging and believe in the creator and your spirit guides or your angels or however you want to look at it. But believe it.
I agree. That's a good one. I like that. That's a very wise message. Very, very wise message. Well, I hope you have many more and enjoy this. And we're going to kick off and get the show going with the creation of the world, of all things. And we're going to be talking a little bit. I wanted to talk about Columbus, but then I says, wait a minute, we're going to go back a little farther. We're kind of going to touch with Columbus. I got some other stuff, but this is probably going to be a two-parter on Columbus. And the discovery of America and the Indians and how they existed, and what they thought of things before and, today. So there we go, because that is important. It is important to, know these things. What was the world and why is it the way it is? You know what I mean? It's all there, and we got to figure it out. And I had a buddy of mine. He's probably listening. So, because me and him kind of got in a little argument about trying to figure out things. But when you argue with somebody who says everything is a lie, you shouldn't believe anything you read or hear, and half of what you see, well, then how are you supposed to get any knowledge if everything is a lie and you just imagine it off the top of your head? So it makes it really difficult. I mean, when you read things in a book, like I got all these old books, but what good are they? Are they all lies? According to him, the Indians never existed. There's no such thing. There's no, everything we have now is what we've had for thousands of years, and all of this before us was all a lie. So,
Really?
pretty much. Yeah. There is no history. It was all made up, kind of thing. And just like, the moon is not as far away because you can look at it and see the craters on it. So it can't be 250 million or 1,000 miles away or something like that. And the sun is a lot closer, because you can put your hand up and feel the heat on it. So it's got to be closer. And are we listening to NASA? It's all lies. They tell us lies. It's no such thing. We never went to space, never went to the moon. We live in a dome. And,
Oh, so he's a flat earther.
Maybe not a flat earther, but we live in a bubble. You can't escape and nobody can come in. That's pretty much it. If you see aliens, they live here too. So it's like, well, then how am I supposed to ever learn anything new? And he says, well, we don't learn anything new. We because I was saying, I'm trying to figure out where did life started changing, because the world was the same for thousands of years, and all of a sudden life changed and became what we have now. And he says, well, that's because, there was a group of smart people with different kind of brains born, and that is how they invented things. And I'm like, so I got to be born with a different kind of brain in order to invent anything? Yep. And you got to be smart. And I'm like, that's not really the way it is. Because I says, you didn't research anything. I researched stuff, and people who invent stuff are usually not the guy who actually manufactures it or does it. Like the Wright brothers. We'll go with the airplane, right? And this is kind of getting a little off track, but it's going to get back on track. They invented they were the first to go to flight, right? That doesn't mean other people weren't trying to invent an airplane, right? And when they did invent the airplane that actually flew, they only flew for a little bit. Now, did they go into airplane manufacturing business? And did they, start making rockets afterwards and all of that? No, they ran a bicycle shop. The only thing they really invented was the propeller. They invented a successful propeller that would move wind across the wings. That's what they did. But did they go into manufacturing and build all kinds of new airplanes? Not really.
Yeah, that because they started selling them to the army.
Yeah, they did. But I mean, they never had other companies came in, seen their idea, copied it, and then that became all these other airplane companies that were making stuff, because you don't go around and go and saying, oh, that's a Wright brothers airplane, kind of like a Ford car, kind of, you know what I'm saying there. Ford didn't invent the car, there was other cars. He just invented a car that could be manufactured fast, and then that way he became famous. But he invented other cars before that too. He wasn't the first to invent the car.
Nobody was the first to invent the product line.
Product line, yes, and therefore he became, he copied the guy who probably invented a car, who made the first car powered by an engine. I haven't looked that one up either.
Well, there were several folks in Europe, Italians and French, all that were coming up with different types of motors for vehicles. I just wanted to point out, though, what a lot of people don't understand about the Wright brothers is that with the invention of the Wright Flyer, they also had like over 100 different patents from things that they made and designed while they were developing the Wright Flyer. And some of those things are still used, like the ailerons and cables. And I worked at Mall Aircraft building short takeoff and landing aircraft. And a lot of the things that some of the basic things, they still use fabric for the sides of the airplane. After 100 years or more, they still use they call it a razorback or something like that. But anyway, it's this like a canvas that they stretch over the aircraft and then spray it with. They call it pipe, plain, dope. And it's it smells bad, but then when it dries and they give it several coats of lacquer, and it's hard to the touch, but you could still put your finger in it. But anyway, I digress.
No, but you're right. They came up with the first successful plane, and they may have made a bunch of patents, but the other people copied them, used the patents, they sold the stuff off, and then we have planes that we have today, even though they're very similar to what they made back in the day. And that's
right. And the Wright brothers, their plane was too hard to fly. That was one of the things that but all of the inventions that they made, so other folks was like, well, we can do one better on this one, and they did.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, because he was trying to say that they were smarter than everybody else. They just, what I think it is, because I have a lot of ideas too. It's just that they must have had more time to spend inventing than, like today, a lot of people can't. You spend all your time working. You spend your time, taking care of the house or paying the bills, or you with your kids, or, all these other things you spend your time doing. And then, of course, they have television and radio and computers now to take up your time. So in that time that you would normally think, well, I could make that better, or I could invent something new to make my life easier, you just say, screw it. I got to go to work. And then when you're at work, you can't be thinking of how to invent something new. You got to spend your time working. Am I wrong?
No, that's right.
Yeah. So when I finally get time to make something, I have to hurry through it. And then, a lot of times I don't finish it because I got to go to work. I got things to do. I just, anyway, they stole it. But that's a good one. I like that, F Kitty. Those ideas were collective, yes, and they were able to literally just a little faster and patent it just a little faster, and they may think that somebody stole it. Yeah, somebody, come up with, because the Wright brothers weren't the first inventing airplanes.
No.
There were 100 other people trying to invent the airplane too. There was other people who probably were successful. They just didn't, file a patent or whatever and make it known, and they didn't have film cameras filming them when they did it. So there you go. So we're going to travel back in time tonight. We're going to go back to, and then next week we're going to be talking about Columbus discovering this little place right here, the world we live in today. This is what most people would think. This was a map from hundreds of years, 1,000 years ago, and this is your world, round shaped, your map, some land. This is where you live, the houses and water, and you don't got much here. Look at that. I don't even know how you can follow that kind of map, but there you go. Imagine trying to get in your ship and sail somewhere. I would get lost. Maybe they knew more about it, but I would get lost. Okay, so tonight, to start out, we're going to do the creation of the world. This ain't very long, so I'm just going to read it from where it stands. And this is out of my old book, and it's called, I had it here a second ago, The Origin of the North American Indians, with a faithful description of their manners and their customs, both civil and military, their religions, languages, dress, and ornaments. This was by John McNash, and this was printed in, it was in 1843. Entered according to the Act of Congress in 1843. So there you go. That's how old this book is. So you're going to get the opinions and ideas of somebody from 1843 writing this down. Then give me a big shout out to everybody. There's Truth Seeker and Daniel R. What about the land? I don't know about what the land. I don't understand. Make that a little clearer, Daniel, and we'll come back to that. F. Kitty's in the house. Susie Q. She's making some tea. She's a little tired, but she's going to listen probably in the background. Off the hook. She says, watch the Y-Files. They have it all on there, and they make good sense. Watch the Y-Files. I like that show. Yeah, I don't know if you watch it, but it's good. It's good. Witchy Moon's in the house. Witchy Moon says love and hugs and happy birthday to you, Hawkeye. There you go.
Thank you.
Coleberry's in the house. Happy birthday. And F. Kitty, Witchy Moon. Did I miss anybody? I don't know. All the women are here to support you tonight. That's what it is. A lot of the women. You're just a handsome old devil, aren't you? And there's Chloe. Chloe's in the house. She's over at her sister's.
I don't know about the handsome, but I'm an old devil.
There you go. Hey, Chloe. There you go. And she says,
thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
And thank God I can call you ladies.
There you go. Okay. With all of that, we're going to go back in time, a little older than you are. The creation of the world. In order to arrive at a particular era, when the matter of this earth was called into existence, philosophers have amused themselves with various ways, the materials of which was composed, and the means whereby they were disposed in order in which we behold them, is a subject also, which, through far beyond the reach of human sanctity, has nevertheless originated theories and controversies, almost without number. Among the learned of all ages and countries, many imagine that the world had no beginning, but existed from all eternity, while others are of the opinion that it did not or did exist at some particular time unknown to man, and that it was destroyed at different times by some great revolution in nature, maybe a cataclysm. Just didn't say it. With regard to the opinion that the world existed from eternity, none of the ancient philosophers seem to have had the least idea of it being possible to produce something out of nothing, not even by the power of the deity itself. Hence, must have arisen an erroneous opinion that the world had no beginning. Next to the system came the doctrine that through the matter of the world be eternal, its form mutable. And the learned have observed, calculated, and commemorated the appearances and revolutions of the heavenly bodies, to the system of which this orb belongs. They have penetrated into the bowels of the earth and the depths of the ocean to terrace the irregular dispositions of these strata and the strange confusion in which their material often intermingled together. Yet their researchers have ended only with suggestions that these spheres have continued to roll through the countless ages. Some have asserted that the idea of creating the world out of nothing is at once a contradiction to reason, which is sufficient to overthrow the doctrine of revelation. Others have boldly stood forth and maintained in the support of the sacred writings. I think he's talking about the Bible. That the fact of the creation out of nothing by an entity, powerful and wise, self-existent God, so far from the beginning repugnant to reason, to say nothing of revelation, is highly probable and demonstrably certain. If we refer to sacred writings for the assessment of truth or knowledge on this point, we only learn that the world had a beginning, without stating any particular period. For Moses, in alluding to the commencement of things, goes no farther than to say that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. From this general language of the divine lawgiver, we cannot evidently ascertain the particular period at which the world began to exist. Indeed, all the philosophical inquiries which have been made in all ages concerning the beginning of creation have not yet been able to enlarge the testimonies of sacred history, or refute its authority by showing any inconsistencies or contradiction in its venerable narratives. With all the ingenuity, therefore, of the scientific, either ancient or modern, no evidence has been produced by which we can reasonably doubt or improve the Mosaic account. And there you go. So basically he's saying, it could be anything. Yes. Catastrophic. I think F. Kitty's got it. Catastrophic was an ascendant scientific idea at the time. Yes. So these are what these people were thinking in 1830. And Vagger Lakey. Hello, I'm from Brazil. I'm from the Kumi tribe. Well, good for you. I'm glad you are here. Maybe I'll have
Really? Hi, how are you?
I will have to write that down and do a show on that one. That'll take some studying because I've never, ever heard of that bit. So I'm going to write that down. Let's see.
And I think that's one of the first people that I know of from Brazil that has entered our chat and spoke with us. Last week, I think there was someone from South America, but I can't remember where had popped in for the first time. So thank you very much from Brazil.
Oh, look at F. Kitty knows all about these people. Well, good for you.
We welcome you.
Also known as I'm going to mispronounce that word, and that word, and that word, are the indigenous people of Brazil and Peru. Neato bandito. I will have to look that up. Next week's show. Good deal. Savage Lee's in the house. Welcome. Anyway, the point is we're going to go with the Indians and we're going to go the discovery of America. Now, if you're going to sail on a map like this, we talked about this. Who was the first people to discover America? Was it the Vikings? Were they making these maps? Was it the Chinese who landed on the coast of the, over on California, Oregon? Today the Eskimos, and they speak pretty much the same language as the people across on the other side there. They were all hot. If they can tell us today that it's 50-mile hike between Russia and Alaska, who's to say that those people back then couldn't make the 50-mile hike to get to North America? That's all I'm saying.
Especially if it's frozen over. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's frozen over, but hey, let's take a trip, and they probably did. I see there's got to be something on that other side, right? Because people are explorers. They're ingenious. They want to go. They want to check things out. That's just who they are. How did these people get to these little islands like Easter Island? Are they following a map like this? In a canoe? Did they build a big boat and come from South America to some little unknown island and settle there and say, this is the best place in the world, we're going to stay? It makes your curiosity really question things. You know what I'm saying?
Have you ever seen the movie Kon-Tiki or read the book?
No, I have not.
Okay. Thor Hydro, back in the late 50s or early 60s, him and a bunch of them, they were talking about how they got to Easter Island and where could people come from. And they built balsa wood rafts that they had seen pictures of from South America, built this raft, very, very rudimentary, and a couple of guys jumped on it and took the trade winds over to Polynesia from South America and proved it. And there's a movie of it. There's not much sound, but it's narrated. It's very interesting. The book goes into a lot more detail. I had to read it back when I was in high school. It was like one of those things you had to read. But let me tell you, the science in it and the adventure of these gentlemen who proved that folks could float over to the islands, that, it wasn't impossible. And so I think that there is lessons to be learned in the Kon-Tiki expedition, in that, that was a long way across the Pacific. It's not near as far across the Atlantic.
Yes, I
just
totally
saying.
agree.
And so, if they came across Iceland and Greenland and up in the north areas up there, and Canada and Newfoundland, it'd been real easy, a whole lot easier than the Kon-Tiki expedition. Exactly.
People were discovering the world. F. Kitty had said something, and I read this somewhere too, that the Egyptians and the Syrians, there's hieroglyphic writings. They say that there's Egyptian writing in the Grand Canyon. Well, where did that come from? Unless there was Egyptian explorers that came here at some point in time. And you couldn't blame them, because every country, has always had explorers. They had ships, and once they could build a ship made out of grass, reeds, or whatever it was, they put it in the ocean and sailed away. And maybe they didn't have compasses and all that good stuff, but don't say that they couldn't get lost at sea, floated out somewhere and said, I can't see land anymore. I have no idea where the direction is, except the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And we're going to sail it out until we either run out of food or we make it to some land. And that's just simple logic, right?
Yep. And history doesn't give enough credit to the seamen of the old days. I mean, talk about explorers. Chinese, Portugal, the Vikings, and not just the Vikings, but I mean, the Scandinavians and also the Eskimos. I mean, they had, kayaks and open sea vessels that carried 2 or 3 people, and they travel all around, killing seals and whales, small whales, and so forth. So, you think about some of the history of some of these different nations, and you go, when I met them, the Koska from the Tlingit tribe, and how he, uh, told me about how they went out and, with spears in a kayak, to kill a big ass whale. I mean, come on. And so them folks were not only brave, but, they were also skilled. And so I don't think that, history, most history, doesn't give those folks enough credit. Also, about the Egyptians, back when I spent a lot of time a few years back down on the coast and in the Forgotten Coast around Carabel Island or Carabel and Dog Island and Alligator Point. But down there, so talking with some of the locals and everything, and just having lunch and talking about stuff. And the one guy's he's saying, I took my sailboat out the other day, and he said there used to be this post out at the end of the channel. And he said it used to have all kinds of look like hieroglyphics on it. And he said was out there, sailing the other day, and there was some boat out there that was pulling it up. Mm-hmm. And he said there used to be a lot of channel markers along the coast of Florida, all the way over to the Mississippi River, and that they had hieroglyphics on them. And they were like, and then back, like, I don't know, mid 70s or so into the 80s, somebody started pulling them up.
Yep.
Somebody didn't want us to know that, now whether or not it was actually the Egyptians, mm-hmm. but the symbols looked like hieroglyphics. Not that they were, but they looked it.
Yeah, and since nobody took a picture of them and documented it, it's all gone now.
Yeah, and it was a lot of local people knew about it, because they all sailed and went out. I mean, a bunch of along the coast over there, a lot of oyster, shucking going on down there. And this is about time for oysters to come in too. But so, them folks know the coast. They know their way around. They know what's there. So, but anyway.
Well, exactly. And that's the whole point. People, were, if you have a group of people, the only ones that didn't, I don't think, did much ocean adventuring were the Native Americans. The ones on the Pacific coast had some pretty good sized boats, and they hunted whales and things like that. But other than that, the East Coast side, they didn't sail out. A lot of these didn't sail. They just, other places like, you go to South America, they were making boats, out of those reeds and stuff like that. And other tribes and other countries were making things, but not the Native Americans, which is kind of odd, isn't it?
Yeah, in a way, I think they were content. I think there was enough rivers and, the natives that got down into the bayous in Louisiana, it depended on where you were. So, if you're in the Appalachian Mountains, what do you need a canoe for? I mean, sort of, but if you live along the coast, you're going to want a boat, even to just go along in the shallows and to catch fish. It might not be that you want to go sailing somewhere, but you absolutely, want a boat to get along the coast. And so I could see where, maybe the jump from Key West over to Cuba, and maybe from Cuba over to Honduras, the Yucatan Peninsula, those aren't very great distances. In fact, as a 72, as that's how old I am this year. The gentleman I bought the canoe from, who was 72 at the time, he said for his 72nd birthday, he paddled my canoe from Key West to Cuba.
Wow.
And had his birthday and then paddled it back the next day. So
Wow.
I bring that up in that, there's history with my canoe, but also that a 72-year-old could paddle across the straits of Florida, over to Cuba and back within 2 days. So
Yeah.
you say, well, I don't know if that's I don't know if the Indians could do it. Nah, listen, he did it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, if you can imagine if an old guy could do that, what can young men do? And that's
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. If they had a plan and some food and stuff, they could really go places and trade. So Kitty said it's human nature to explore, and that they had means to trade and knowledge and all that good stuff. When Columbus landed on that island, the first island he landed on, he noticed that the natives had some gold on them, and he noticed a lot of different things. But the thing is, they weren't getting that gold off that island. There was no gold on that island. So where'd they get it from? They were trading with the mainland.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
They were yeah, and there ain't no gold in Florida, so they had to have been getting it. The closest place would have been the Yucatan.
Yeah, well, unless they went north, and I don't think the northern natives were actually mining metals at all. I mean, as
Not
far as
really.
I can tell, the only metals that they were mining were maybe some copper, up in Michigan area. So the natives of North America were more stone based. They would use flint and stuff to make knives and sharp edges and arrowheads and things like that. Not copper. Maybe some copper stuff to make a few things here and there, but mainly they were stone based, caveman style in a way. Spears and arrowheads and hammers and whatever, because they couldn't cut trees down, with those hammers like they had. I mean, we did plenty of shows on them, and when the Europeans came over, that was one of the first things they were introduced to: hoes and rakes and hammers and axes, to cut down a tree. They couldn't cut down trees unless they girdled them, and then they hollowed them out with by burning and chipping and burning and chipping, which is, it takes a long time.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the broad axe was one thing that they were like, what?
Yes. So maybe the other cultures came visiting from encountering someone from America. The only variable would be the currents. They are large islands that even now are almost impossible to get to by sea. Yes. And that's the thing. It's the currents, like if you, like the old man you're talking about, he had 2 days of good weather and he knew where he was going. He could make it by himself. But what if there was a storm? It would have thrown your little canoe off, and you might have ended up in Texas. Not that you want to do, but you might end up in, some long, far away place. And then of course, what are you going to do when you get there? Well, you're either going to figure out a way to get back home, or you're going to stay put.
Yeah, back in those days, they ended up staying put mostly.
Yeah, you make a village.
Sometimes they, and it did depend on the currents, actually, and also the trade winds.
The trade winds, yes. Because people in general are not stupid, and when they come up with a situation, the natives were the same way, I'm sure, because that's just human way to go. They're explorers, they're inventors. because somebody had to figure out a way to hollow out or make a canoe. I mean, I've never cut down trees and said, hey, I just know how to make a canoe and make it float. I'm going to go out and make a canoe so I can sail down the river. But those natives would cut down the trees and peel the bark and have a canoe in no time at all. So how can they do it? And I still have no idea. I'm way more advanced in technology than they would be. Am I wrong? I mean, but apparently they knew that was their technology. They could make a canoe in a couple of days. You could sail down the river.
Yep. And something I've been following on a YouTube video. It's British, and they're restoring a very large Viking ship, and they're doing it with old oak, and they're doing it. They're hand hewing the pieces, how they put in the keel and everything, and step by step, and how they have they're doing a clapboard kind of side on it. But it's taken them years to cut the wood, to find the trees, to mill them down, to split them, and then to apply them to the ship.
Yeah.
And them Vikings, they were cutting stuff up with just broad axes, and there's a crew of guys, and they just worked every day chopping, hacking, and sanding to make these huge boats. And it's like, and they're like, man, we've been working on this thing, and we've been using some modern techniques, and we just can't believe it, how these guys used to just whip what seemed like they just whip them together, effortlessly. They knew how to cut the angles just right. And some of the angles on the bottom of the boat and how they're fit together and how they're, it's like these guys were like, we had to invent new math in order to figure out how they did this stuff. And so, those quote ancient boat builders, especially the Vikings in their longboats, they really were smart. They were not stupid by any stretch of the imagination. So as far back as you can, find the Viking boats, them folks knew their stuff.
And they were sailors, and who says that they didn't? They went to Iceland, they went to Greenland. Why wouldn't they keep going and make their way down the coast and down North America? Were they the first people? Of course, I believe the Vikings were here long before the white man came, the Europeans or Sir Francis Drake or whoever came first. I believe that they did. I also have that book about how they knew there was land over here, and then the king and the Pope got together and sent the friars over here to map it all out. I
think we talked about it before, but I just seen this video the other day, and I should write these things down. But anyway, the person was discussing some of the artifacts they'd found in the Vatican, and one of them dated back to like 14 something, 15 something, and it was basically the Vatican laying claim to the Americas.
Yep.
And it was basically, like a contract kind of deal and title. And, the Vatican, is like, no, we own this place. We laid claim to it before anybody else said, so therefore we own it. And I was, I think I bookmarked it to go back and watch it. But so the Vatican has been at it, since the, 1300s. And also, what a lot of people don't remember this name, Amerigo Vespucci. Amerigo. They say that America isn't named after him. But, he was over here about the same time that Christopher Columbus was. And it just so happened that Chris got christened as the first guy when Amerigo Vespucci probably beat him out.
I think there was a lot of people that beat him out. He was just the one that got all the credit. And
Exactly.
and like I did a show, we did a show here long before about how, he was like, when I researched it, he was kind of like the chosen one. Like, we need a guy to go over where, the empires were all falling apart because Europe was, really, they were dying. The people, trees were all cut down. The food was all eaten. There was too many people. They had the plagues that went through. Everybody was warring, and they needed to expand. And of course, the Native Americans that lived here, they didn't know any of it. And when they came over, they said, the king owns your land. We laid claim. The Pope owns your land. We laid claim. What? Yep. How is that possible? Did the Celtics, that came over here, and even Thomas Jefferson told Lewis and Clark, go out there and look for their markers and, take them down because it's our land now. It was, they'll come back and say they claimed it 1,000 years before.
Right. And in a way, he was right, because this recent document they found in the Vatican kind of proves that they did lay claim to it. It wasn't just a bunch of, we've been talking about it, and I had heard something, from Sister Helene, Sister Helene and the hurricane coming. And she was like, no, the Vatican laid claim to it, a long time ago. And also, because the Queen of Spain was footing the bill for it, so they, that'd be like having Elon Musk backing you or something, to have the Queen of Spain and everybody, and 3 ships went,
Yeah. So here's the thing. Okay, let's look at this map for a second. World map by Jessup Cousin, 1570. Okay, so this is 1570, and if I blow this map up a little bit so we can see, and I didn't tell you what year this map was, made. By looking at it, you would say, well, that pretty much looks like the world map we see today, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much, the coastline, Central America, South America, both sides, North America. Here's the Florida. Here's Florida comes down. He's got a little bit of this off here, but it pretty much. I suppose if we really looked at it better, you could really tell. Africa. Now I expect Africa, India, and all of that to be mapped out because people live there. But he's even got Antarctica on here. Look at the bottom here. See?
Yeah.
Antarctica. Okay. Oh, wait a minute.
Well, also South America. Look at how South America, that's pretty much what South America looks like.
Exactly. So Columbus in 1492 discovers America, and by 1570, everything's all mapped out already. What did they send? Thousands and thousands and thousands of people over here, or to go through all the rivers and streams and coastline and that must have been a hell of a good business to be in as a what do you call it, the guy that marks out things and makes maps, surveyor. Yeah, be a surveyor. You want to be a surveyor?
Cardiologists are the ones that made the maps.
Yeah, but I mean, a surveyor, you need surveyors to map it out so you can make the map. But you must have had, thousands and thousands of surveyors so you knew all the inlets and outlets, and where the coastline is and around South America, so you can make and how did they make Antarctica? Who's doing this? That's what I'm saying. What, you mapped out the coastline of Antarctica too while you were at it? That must have been some really good surveyors. You see where I'm getting this whole thing? What the name?
Oh yeah.
the natives come up and said, hey, we got some sites to see. Here's a map for you. This is our property over here, and this is the river, and heck, I can barely read a road map and get the right directions, or stand on a hill and point left and right and north and south and east and west. And these guys were drawing maps that were so worldly accurate that this looks very modern. But then when you scrunch it down and it said this was from 1570, I say, what the fudge, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying is something was going on, like we read about the creation of the world, that, things get destroyed and things get rebuilt. And there's cataclysms, and we just don't know. People go off of, the Bible and say that's, Moses wrote, according to what it says in the Bible, he wrote most of the first bunch of chapters in there. So we're going off of one man's recollection of all the history of the world. Should you trust one man's writing of the history of the world? Really? And he didn't get anything wrong? You're only seeing it from his viewpoint. That's the problem. He says, well, the world in, 6 days was recreated, and the waters and the heavens, the earth, blah, 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 blah. Let's go with that. And take into account, what about all the other races that live on the planet? You know what I mean? So
yep.
I call bullshit on that. So
that map, go back, if you will.
You want to go back? Sure.
Just for a second. It looks like somebody, Jules Verne wrote a book, Around the World in 80 Days.
Yep.
And it almost looks like somebody had a balloon and did some traveling. I mean,
yeah,
because looking, I'm an old map guy from back in Cub Scouts back in the 60s. And I got all kinds of maps at all kinds of areas, and topo maps, so I know what my elevation is, kind of thing. So, and I know how to read them without a GPS. All I have to have is a compass. Yep. And I don't have to have a special compass. All I need is one. So, but anyway, but to have, back in the day when I was taking drafting, I had to take a quarter of surveying. And so we had to serve our instructor gave us certain areas that he had logged out and had surveyed himself. And then he said, okay, here's the equipment, here's your stuff. Now you go survey it and see if you get the same thing I do. Well, in doing so, we learned how to use a theodolite. And it's like, one of the things that was really hard to do was to try to write down, on the ground what we were looking at and try to picture it from the air. And this was long before they had drones. So, I mean, nowadays they can fly a drone up and you can look down on the property and see where the stakes are. But no, so you had to imagine what it looked like from top, from an aerial view of it, so that you could plot it and draw it out, and that it would look like something, it would look like the boundaries of somebody's property. But so it was in the imagination of trying to figure out what it would look like with just simply coordinates on a piece of paper. Yeah. So the idea that these guys were sailing along in a boat, out on the ocean, looking at the shoreline and mapping it out to the accuracy they have, holy moly, them boys was good.
Yeah.
Or they had space aliens helping them. And I mean it. I'm that they had help because those things are too dadgum accurate from just sailing around. I don't remember them sailing around South America by then. So how did they know what South America looked like if they had never sailed around the dip?
Yeah, yeah. Here's another. Here is another map, and this one here is a Chinese map made in the 1400s. And this is their map. Now they have the coast. They have all around the coast on both sides of North America. Some of it's a little weird, like Alaska here, and they got the coast of California and some big islands over here. And wish I had a better map of it, maybe. But
what if the water was different too? You know what I mean?
This is a kind of a picture of it, but you get the idea that obviously they've been around South America. They've been around. They knew that it got really narrow here in Central America. They knew that North America was this big. This is in the 1400s.
Right.
Here's Africa and India right there. I can point out a lot. This is China. I can point out a lot of stuff. They knew that Alaska and the Bering Strait here was just a narrow slit too, just like it is today. They knew this. So, when you start looking at it, you're like, yeah, well, if this is very small there, you could sail across and get over here. Or did they sail across the ocean? Obviously, it looks like there's some islands here. I wish this picture was much better, but and they also knew there was something at the bottom of the earth, and they knew it was round. Otherwise, they would have made the map flat, like a flat earth. Right?
Right.
So they knew the earth was round. They knew that there was Antarctica was on the bottom, and so, like I said, people aren't stupid. They did travel. They went places. They mapped out stuff. Now, this isn't such a detailed map, but it shows some rivers.
For them, for back then, that's very detailed.
Yes, that means that you were going these places. People before you went these places, and you were planning on going back to these places, or why would you even map it? That's the whole thing, is if you didn't plan on going back, you wouldn't map the land,
Right.
And here's your ancient map from the 1400s. This tells you that they knew the world was round. They knew it was, where the land masses are. Really, this isn't a bad map for the 1400s.
You could still use it today and find your way around if you needed to.
Yes, you could. Okay, see here, this is one of the things I was talking about. English Franciscans mapped North America in 1330 to 1360. The result was the first scientific map of the New World. Roger Bacon conceived the project. Pope Clement endorsed it in 1265. Oxford deans trained friars in surveying, and King Edward III launched the effort in 1360. Thus, Edward's great-grandson, Prince Henry of Portugal, knew the location of Florida in 1420, and contains hundreds of illustrations, including the Friar's Map, which the author found in 1995. So even just if this is true, we're not saying it's true, but it does make sense that they were over here. The Pope endorsed this, and like you were saying, that ancient text, the whatever it was you were talking about, in 1265. This was long before Columbus. Columbus was over here in 1492. That's like 70 years after Henry of Portugal knew the location of Florida in 1420. This is why they had such a good map, because they trained the friars and sent them out in 1330 through 1360 to map out the new world. And even if they didn't go into the interior of the world, if you just map the coastline of the world, how far ahead would you be? Right?
Right.
So there you go. I mean, just
And so we can say because there were redheaded Native Americans in northeastern America, up in Newfoundland.
yeah.
And that there's a lot of artifacts and stuff that and and steel and ornaments and things like that, so that they can prove that we're Viking-ish, if not just Danish, which meant Vikings and Netherlands and up there. So but Leif Erikson and who was the other one, something to green, or anyway, but
Yeah.
so they knew that they had been across, because they're in the history books. So, but not everybody was in the history books. I mean, there are a lot of people sailing. There were a lot of adventurers. And so, and the fact that back in the day, and I don't know how it's taught now, but Christopher Columbus, he was going to sail off the edge of the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knew that Chris wasn't going to make it. He had to take 3 ships in case one of them went over the edge. The dragons were going to eat him up. I mean, that's a story we were told.
Yes.
And that Chris didn't know anything about nothing.
Yeah, no,
And
he knew
nobody had ever been across, the middle of the Atlantic. And
Yeah.
that all the dragons and all the maps and everything showed that the end of the world was in the Atlantic, going to, fall off the edge. So all that nucky that they taught in school, I don't know if they're still teaching it.
Oh, probably.
But that they already had maps. They already knew about the peninsula of Florida. So the stories about Christopher Columbus sailing off the edge of the world is all nonsense.
That's right. Well, and here's a good one that I learned today after studying Christopher Columbus, that his wife, his first wife that he married, she was kind of poor, and even though her family they weren't real well to do, and his family was real well to do, but he married her because he said he would forego the dowry. The woman getting married would get a dowry with her,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Okay, so he forgoed that to get into that family tree, or that family. Eventually, but who was her family? They were map makers. And he went to work for her father for a short period of time. And, well, what do you think he's going to find when he's a map maker? Every map that's ever been made, he's going to have, right? So because you're going to have maps to make maps. And of course, when he had that, he probably found these maps, and eventually, went on these, because he was a sailor too, and an adventurer and a trader. And of course, you got maps, you're going to go. That's what he did. And his wife, they say she was murdered, believe it or not. Why is that so? I'm going to dig into that a little bit, because I didn't know his wife was murdered. Kind of conspiracy theory there now, you're thinking, right? So we're going to go with that. But if you read this, you're talking about Leif Erikson. Here it says, the age of discovery. At this point in time, the new land was claimed as a sovereign realm under the gist of King Magnus Eriksson, ruler of both Norway and Sweden. And it is also clear that the friar's map played a crucial role in the early Portuguese and Spanish navigation. The manuscript reached the hands of Portugal, Prince Henry, the navigator, who was the grandson of an English regent, John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster and son of Edward III. The Invento Fortunate was also known to Bristol merchants who sailed to Newfoundland in the 1480s. And it was known to Columbus, who reviewed the book prior to his Arctic voyage. Now, you didn't hear about his Arctic voyage, now did you? What did he do? Why was he sailing in the north when he's from he's Italian, and he went to Portugal, and now he's in the Arctic? What would you be going to the Arctic for, right?
To learn how to sail down the coast.
That's right. The Arctic Ocean voyage in 1477, which is not that long before, and his Vesuvian voyage in 1498. A map of Arctic regions attributed to the friar appeared in the works of such renowned geographers as Martin Behem and John Rusheth and Ortiz and Medicor. Thus, it can be demonstrated with the greatest assurance and pride that the English people deserve the lion's share of credit for early New World discovery. And I kind of agree with that. It wasn't just them. It was a whole world conspiracy. You had the Pope in on it. You had the Englishmen on it. You had the Portuguese. You had them all in on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What year was the Vikings? Did it say?
No. Roger Bacon in 1266. Now we have evidence from form of a map and a manuscript invented. Vinto Fortunate confirmed that the English Franciscans traveled to the New World in the very dawn of the early age. So maybe it was even in the 1200s. Early.
I think it was like maybe in the 700s is what I was trying to remember. That it really goes back a ways, but that's why I asked. But anyway,
yeah,
they went back at least the 1100s. The Vikings were already going to North America. So, right. And so one of the things that I was doing a little research myself, and I'll have to find my notes since we're talking about this. Find my notes another time. But I was looking, and I asked the question, who built the first boats? And they were like, "Ooh, it was like the Phoenicians, the Etruscans and some folks in the Mediterranean."
Yeah.
But in doing the Google search, it never mentioned. It only mentioned the Mediterranean area. That's like Google only focused on the Mesopotamian area, Egypt, that area. Like that's the only place that sailing could have started, is my point.
Oh, I agree.
They didn't say so. And I need to ask the question again. When was the earliest Chinese boat? When was the earliest African boat? Or when was the earliest raft by the South Americans who sailed over on Kon-Tiki over to the islands off of the coast of South America?
Well,
so it's like
the Chinese were building these big. Here's a picture of the boats. They were building these big giant boats, and if you kind of look at this, you can see the size of these boats. And I researched this a little bit, and when I read about these big boats like this, they built these huge boats that could hold 600 men on them.
Yeah.
So 600 men on a boat back in the day would have been unheard of. That's like having an army on a boat. 600 men, and then you gotta have supplies for them. You gotta feed them. You gotta clothe them. You gotta have places for them to live and sleep and eat. And this boat is humongous. Look at all the sails on this. Compared to these other ships down here. Now you look at these other little ships over here. and you're thinking, oh, well, they got two, 3 sails, they're pretty big. This boat is enormous. This is an enormous boat. Don't tell me they
It's as
didn't.
big as an aircraft carrier is now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge boat, and it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men are on there to work the sails and blah blah blah. And you don't tell me they're sailing around the coast with that boat. This is an ocean going vessel. They are going over to the Americas. They're influencing the natives. The natives were not this is a native boat. As much as they ever recorded on anybody, this is a native boat. They made a raft. They had a rudimentary sail. They fished. They had canoes. Very primitive and simple. The natives didn't travel anywhere. As far as I ever can see, they never built anything bigger than a hollowed out log or a canoe. I mean, they had some bigger ones, but never anything of enormous size.
Nope, that raft that you just showed was about, if they had a lot of furs or whatever coming down the Ohio or some of the other, rivers, that they built bigger, rafts. But here's the thing. They didn't have a need for a raft until the French and British came along.
That's right.
Because their canoes were large enough to carry what they needed. But when they started going into business and started really trading, and like the beaver and so forth, then they needed, their dugout canoes weren't big enough. They had to build rafts. And I'm not sure, but I think they learned raft building from the English or the French, because they saw that they were going down the Ohio and a bigger raft and blah, 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 blah. Oh, we can make those. But I don't know if they built truly that they knew how to put a couple of logs together, but and Native Americans were ingenious at, but I think they learned a better technique when they saw the French and the English come in. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, yes. When
they didn't have a need for a raft,
Well, and of course they were influenced. Hey, they see something, just and just like when they seen the clothing, they liked clothing and they liked the colors, and then of course they adorned themselves with more colors because they could get it now. But back to the maps here, you can see that they mapped these out. Here's the Amazon River. Maybe it ain't all accurate, but they knew it went here, and they knew it went for a long ways. They knew there was land at the bottom. I think who was it said something about F. Kitty, I think it was, said something about America, or the Piri Reis map. They used a lot of where did he get it from then? Who mapped it out for him? So
look at South America, almost touching Antarctica.
Yep.
And kind of to the point that almost does touch Antarctica.
Yeah, exactly. And or like Central America here is kind of mapped out pretty well. And the East Coast is mapped out really well. But I think this mountainous region kind of stopped everybody. The Appalachian Mountains kind of really held people back. And that's why the inside of the United States didn't really get anything. They didn't know much about it.
As were the Rocky Mountains on the West Coast. The Chinese were stayed along the coast, but for folks who've never been along the coast, if you got out of the boat and saw all them mountains and Mount St. Helen and Mount Shasta and all along in there. And back, 1400, those volcanoes might have been smoking. And, and so it's like, well, what did they see? So, but them mountains would have slowed them, the Rockies would have slowed them down big time. So the
Yes.
effects of the Chinese stayed in the lowlands and the valleys of California. But, once you get out of the San Fernando Valley and start heading east, it's 12,000 feet, 10,000 feet.
Well,
it ain't easy.
so the big question of the day was, and I think you answered it, is the influence, because we're talking about the creation of the world and the beginning of everything, and we're going to lead up into Columbus discovering America next week. But the idea is people came here before, and did the rest of the world influence the natives in North and South America? From trade to their culture or anything like that. Do you think that was influenced by other groups of people?
Yes, but I think that the numbers of people that came first who did initial trading were so few that it didn't have a major influence. And it wasn't till later, when there was more traffic, if you know what I mean. And for the Pope to make a declaration, yeah, we own it, haul ass, go get some, boy, that was unfair, wasn't it? Shame on me.
I know.
They took it from the Indian, we own it now. What? So if anybody needs reparations, it should still be the Native Americans. But I don't think that there was enough travel from Europe or from China. I think there was more influence from China in that some of the artwork and things of the Tlingit and I can't think of the other tribes along the West Coast. But, with the carvings, the totem poles, and how some of the buildings are made, how some of the lodges are constructed. They're made, the old post and beam and stuff, they're without any nails and stuff, and which resembles what the Japanese and what the and how the Chinese built in the old days. So it's like, one could say absolutely, their architecture absolutely resembles, that type of architecture from China and Japan. So, but anyway,
Absolutely. We got it. Oh, go ahead.
Huh?
But go ahead.
But anyway, so thinking about what they discussed in the 60s when I was in school, grade school, learning about all that kind of stuff. The Chinese were never mentioned. We did study about Leif Erikson and the Vikings coming over, to Newfoundland. So, and of course, I went to a Catholic school which taught differently than what public schools did. They just did. Their textbooks were different. Compared it with, folks that I knew that went to public high school. And so I was grateful for going to Tampa Catholic because they really did teach us well. But with that said, they still didn't teach us nothing about, the Chinese coming over, or, the fact that, they mentioned Amerigo Vespucci, but it was all about Columbus and it was all about this. And well, how'd they get their maps? And how, wait a minute, you back that boat up some. Because apparently back in the late 1300s, folks already knew about this stuff.
That's right. I mean, these guys were making maps with the world round. I mean, I
Right.
showed you the pictures. In the 1400s, they knew the world was round already. So otherwise,
Yep.
they would have made the map flat.
And
So
they
there you
knew
go.
the basic shapes of the continents.
They did that. They did.
They knew the basic shapes.
Well, it's story time. Richard King, he's ready. Story time, yes, he says. So, okay. Enough of my stuff. We're going to have part 2 next week on Columbus. All the way up to Columbus Day, anyway.
Yeah, and I know, everybody knows me. I talk about aliens all the time. But here's something, honestly, that we should consider. And that because there's evidence of, like the Nazca lines, for example, just why do they make these things that you can only see from the sky? So, with that said, the ancient alien theory is like, so what if some of these ancient mariners had been helped along the way to be able to spot it? Maybe they were taken up, maybe they were just helped and saying, this is how you use a sextant. Who invented that? And where'd they get the idea for that?
Yeah.
You know what a sextant is, right? For
Yeah.
people who don't know what it is, it's a device that you use that you can plot where you are on a map if you got it. So
By using the stars.
yep, and or the sun,
or the sun. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or landmarks. There are different ways to use a sextant, but absolutely. So, and Columbus had one, and they had compasses and they had, so they had as much tech as possible during that time. But you got to wonder because of the detail. And oh no, they just saw it from the bank. I, I still shake my head and go, I think they had at least a balloon, and but
Mm-hmm.
from the tie up and the perspective, having been a draftsman, I guess I still am, but a draftsman and drawing and perspective and doing some mapping myself back when I was in school, that stuff ain't easy. It just ain't, and
Mm-hmm.
somewhere along the line, I do absolutely do feel they had help. But that,
Yeah.
of course, is there any clues? Well, in my opinion, the clues are the maps.
There are. They are.
There it is. Well, how do you know, Dave? Why would you talk like that? Because there's a map from 14, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's still there. Unbeknownst. But anyway, we're getting ready for story. What do you got for story tonight? You're gonna run out of time.
Oh, well, then maybe we'll only do part 1.
I don't want to cut into your story time.
No, that's all right. Well, we have been doing this a while, ain't we?
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, well,
Yappy. We just been yapping right away.
It's a good subject, though. It really is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of new recent information too. About like that thing coming out about the Vatican and that they had a contract. I was just like, what? I just kind of sort of thought it was hearsay, but no, they got a copy. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, so this particular story is we are still on American fairy tales, American Indian fairy tales, Snowbird, the Water Tiger, and etc. by Margaret Compton, 1907. This particular story is in 2 parts, and it's been at least a year. But I can tell you, I don't know if the story was named the same, but we did a lot of stories from the last book that we read from was from the Seneca. And before then, we had a book, that I was reading from. And this story reminds me, and I think is very similar, but it's been at least a year or more, probably more, since I've read this story from another book. So I'm just warning you, if it sounds like you've heard this story before, probably you have, and it's very similar to what I read before. So give me a second, we'll start off. So this is called The Magic Feather. Excuse me. The Magic Feather. In the depths of the forest, in the land of the Dakotas, stood a wigwam many leagues distant from any other. The old man, who had been known to live in it, was supposed to have died, but he kept himself in hiding for the sake of his little grandson, whose mother had brought him there to escape the giants. The Dakotas had once been a brave and mighty people. They were swift runners and proud of their fleetness. It had been told among the nations for many generations that a great chief should spring from this tribe and that he should conquer all his enemies, even the giants who had made themselves strong by eating the flesh of those they took in battle and drinking their blood. This great chief should wear a white feather and should be known by its name. The giants believed the story and sought to prevent it from coming true. So they said to the Dakotas, "Let us run a race. If you win, you shall have our sons and our daughters to do with them as you please. And if we win, we will take yours." Some of the wise Indians shook their heads and said, "Suppose the giants win. They will kill our children, and we will serve them as dainty food upon their tables." But the young man answered, "Caw! Who can outrun the Dakotas? We shall return from the race with the young giants bound hand and foot to fetch and carry for us all our days." So they agreed to wager and ran with the giants. Now it was not to be supposed that the giants would act fairly. They dug pitfalls on the prairie, covering them with leaves and grass, which caused the runners to stumble and lose the race. The Dakotas, therefore, had to bring out their children and give them to the giants. When they were counted, one child was missing. The giants roared with anger and made the whole tribe search for him, but he could not be found. Then the giants killed the father instead and ate his flesh, grumbling and muttering vengeance with every mouthful. This was the child whose home was in the forest. When he was still a very little fellow, his grandfather made him a tiny bow and some smooth, light arrows, and taught him how to use them. The first time he ventured from the lodge, he brought home a rabbit, the second a squirrel, and he shot a fine, large deer long before he was strong enough to drag it home. One day, when he was almost 14 years old, he heard a voice calling to him as he went through the thick woods. "Come hither, you wearer of the white feather. You do not yet wear it, but you are worthy of it." He looked about, but at first saw no one. At last he caught sight of the head of a little old man among the trees. On going up to it, he discovered that the body from the heart downwards was wood and fast in the earth. He thought some hunter must have leaped upon a rotten stump, and it giving way had caught and held him fast. But he soon recognized the roots of an old oak that he well knew. Its top had been blighted by a stroke of lightning, and the lower branches were so dark that no birds built their nests on them, and few even lighted on them. The boy knew nothing of the world except what his grandfather had taught him. He had once found some lodge poles on the edge of the forest and a heap of ashes like those about their own wigwam, by which he guessed that there were other people living. He had never been told why he was living with an old man so far away from others, or of his father, but the time had come for him to know these things. The head which had called him said as he came nearer, "Go home, white feather, and lie down to sleep. You will dream that on waking will find a pipe, a pouch of smoking mixture, and a long white feather beside you. Put the feather on your head, and as you smoke, you will see the cloud which rises from your pipe pass out of the doorway as a flock of pigeons." The voice then told him who he was, and also that the giants had never given up looking for him. He was to wait for them no longer, but to go boldly to their lodge and offer to race with them. "Here," said the voice, "is an enchanted vine, which you are to throw over the head of everyone who runs with you." White Feather, as he was thenceforth called, picked up the vine, went quickly home, and did as he was told. He heard the voice, awoke, and found the pouch of tobacco, the pipe, and the white feather. Placing the feather on his head, he filled the pipe and sat down to smoke. His grandfather, who was at work not far from the wigwam, was astonished to see flocks of pigeons flying over his head, and still more surprised to find that they came from his own doorway. When he went in and saw the boy wearing the white feather, he knew what it all meant and became very sad, for he loved the boy so much that he could not bear the thought of losing him. The next morning, White Feather went in search of the giants. He passed through the forest, out upon the prairie, and through other woods, across another prairie, until at last he saw a tall lodge pole in the middle of the forest. He went boldly up to it, thinking to surprise the giants, but his coming was not unexpected. For the little spirits which carry the news had heard the voice speaking to him, and had hastened to tell those whom it most concerned. The giants were 6 brothers who lived in a lodge that was ill-kept and dirty. When they saw the boy coming, they made fun of him among themselves, but when he entered the lodge, they pretended that they were glad to see him and flattered him, telling him that his fame as a brave had already reached them. White Feather knew well what they wanted. He proposed the race, and though this was just what they had intended doing, they laughed at his offer. At last they said that if he would have it so, he should try first with the smallest and weakest of their number. They were to run towards the east until they came to a certain tree, which had been stripped of its bark, and then back to the starting point, where a war club made of iron was driven into the ground. Whoever reached this first was to beat the other's brains out with it. White Feather and the youngest giant ran nimbly on, and the giants who were watching were rejoiced to see their brother gain slowly but surely, and at last shoot ahead of White Feather. When his enemy was almost at the goal, the boy, who was only a few feet behind, threw the enchanted vine over the giant's head, which caused him to fall back helpless. No one expected anything more than an accident, for the vine could not be seen except by him who carried it. After White Feather had cut off the giant's head, the brothers thought to get the better of him and begged him to leave the head with them, for they thought that by magic they might bring it back to life. But he claimed his right to take it home to his grandfather. The next morning he returned to run with the second giant, whom he defeated in the same manner. The third morning, the third, and so on until all but one were killed. As he went towards the giant's lodge on the sixth morning, he heard the voice of the old man of the oak tree who had first appeared to him. It came to warn him. It told him that the sixth giant was afraid to race with him and would therefore try to deceive him and work enchantment on him. As he went through the wood, he would meet a beautiful woman, the most beautiful in the world. To avoid danger, he must wish himself an elk, and he would be changed into that animal. Even then, he must keep out of her way, for she meant to do him harm. White Feather had not gone far from the tree when he met her. He had never seen a woman before, and this one was so beautiful that he wished himself an elk at once, for he was sure she would bewitch him. He could not tear himself away from the spot, however, but kept browsing near her, raising his eyes now and then to look at her. She went to him, laid her hand upon his neck, and stroked his sides. Looking from him, she sighed, and as he turned his head towards her, she reproached him for changing himself from a tall and handsome man to such an ugly creature. "For," said she, "I heard of you in a distant land, and though many sought me, I came hither to be your wife." As White Feather looked at her, he saw tears shining in her eyes, and almost before he knew it, he wished himself a man again. In a moment, he was restored to his natural shape, and the woman flung her arms about his neck and kissed him. By and by, she coaxed him to lie down on the ground and put his head on her lap. Now, this beautiful woman was really the giant in disguise. And as White Feather lay his head on her knee, she stroked his hair and forehead, and by her magic put him to sleep. Then she took an axe and broke his back. This done, she changed herself into the giant, turned White Feather into a dog, and bade him follow to the lodge. The giant took the white feather and placed it on his own head, for he knew there was magic in it, and he wished to make the tribes honor him as the great warrior they had long expected. End of part 1. Do you think we have time for part 2?
You want? Go right ahead. That went a lot faster than I expected. So
Me too. Okay, so get a drink of water, tea, coffee. Part 2 of the Magic Feather. In a little village, but a woman's journey from the home of the giants, lived a chief named Redwing. He had 2 daughters, White Weasel and Crystal Stone, each noted for her beauty and haughtiness. Though Crystal Stone was kind to everyone but her lovers, who came from far and near and were a constant source of jealousy to White Weasel, the elder. The eldest of the giants was White Weasel's suitor, but she was afraid of him. So both the sisters remained unmarried. When the news of White Feather's race with the giants came to the village, each of the maidens determined that she would win the young brave for a husband. White Weasel wanted someone who would be a great chief and make all the tribes afraid of him. Crystal Stone loved him beforehand, for she knew he must be good as well as brave, else the white feather would not have been given to him. Each kept the wish to herself and went into the woods to fast, that it might come true. When they heard that White Feather was on his way through the forest, White Weasel set her lodge in order and dressed herself gaily, hoping thereby to attract his attention. Her sister made no such preparation, for she thought so brave and wise a chief would have too good sense to take notice of a woman's finery. When the giant passed through the forest, White Weasel went out and invited him into her lodge. He entered, and she did not guess that it was the giant of whom she had been in such fear. Crystal Stone invited the dog into her lodge. Her sister had shut him out and was kind to it, as she had always been to dumb creatures. Now, although the dog was enchanted and could not change his condition, he still had more than human sense and knew all the thoughts of his mistress. He grew to love her more and more every day and looked about for some way to show it. One day, when the giant was hunting on the prairie, the dog went out to hunt also, but he ran down to the bank of the river. He stepped cautiously into the water and drew out a large stone, which was turned into a beaver as soon as it touched the ground. He took it home to his mistress, who showed it to her sister and offered to share it with her. White Weasel refused it, but told her husband he had better follow the dog and discover where such fine beavers could be had. The giant went and, hiding behind a tree, saw the dog draw out a stone, which turned into a beaver. After the animal had gone home, he went down to the water and drew out a stone, which likewise turned into a beaver. He tied it to his belt and took it home, throwing it down at the door of his lodge. When he had been at home a little while, he told his wife to go and bring in his belt. She did so, but there was no beaver tied to it, only a large, smooth stone, such as he had drawn out of the water. The dog, knowing that he had been watched, would not go for more beavers, but the next day went through the woods until he came to a charred tree. He broke off a small branch, which turned into a bear as soon as he took hold of it to carry it home. The giant, who had been watching him, also broke off a branch, and he too secured a bear. But when he took it home and told his wife to fetch it in, she found only a black stick. Then White Weasel became very angry and scoffed at her husband, asking him if this was the way he had done the wonderful things that he had made his fame. She said, "You are a coward, though you are so big and great." The next day, after the giant had gone out, she went to the village to tell her father, Redwing, how badly her husband treated her in not bringing home food. She also told him that her sister, who had taken the dog into her wigwam, also had plenty to eat, and that Crystal Stone pitied the wife of the wearer of the white feather, who often had to go hungry. Redwing listened to her story and knew at once that there must be magic at work somewhere. He sent a company of young men and women to the lodge of Crystal Stone to see if White Weasel's story were true, and if so, to bring his younger daughter and the dog to his wigwam. Meanwhile, the dog had asked his mistress to give him a bath such as the Indians take. They went down to the river, where he pointed out a spot on which she was to build him a lodge. She made it of grass and sticks, and after heating some large stones, laid them on the floor, leaving only just enough room for the dog to crawl in and lie down. Then she poured water on the stones, which caused a thick steam that almost choked him. He lay in it for a long time, after which, raising himself, he rushed out and jumped into a pool of water formed by the river. He came out a tall, handsome man, but without the power of speech. The messengers from Redwing were greatly astonished at finding a man instead of the dog that they had expected to see, but had no trouble in persuading him and Crystal Stone to go with them. Redwing was as much astonished as his messengers had been, and called all the wise men of the tribe to witness what should take place and to give counsel concerning his daughters. The whole tribe and many strangers soon assembled. The giant came also and brought with him the magic pipe that had been given to White Feather in his dream. He smoked it and passed it to the Indians to smoke, but nothing came of it. Then White Feather motioned to them that he wished to take it. He also asked for the white feather, which he placed on his head. When the first whiff from the pipe, lo, clouds of blue and white pigeons rushed from the smoke. The men sprang to their feet, astonished to see such magic. Whitefeather's speech returned, and in answer to the questions put to him, he told his story to the chief. Redwing and the council listened and smoked for a time in silence. Then the oldest and wisest brave ordered the giant to appear before Whitefeather, who should transform him into a dog. Whitefeather accomplished this by knocking upon him the ashes from the magic pipe. It was next decreed that the boys of the tribe should take the war clubs of their fathers and, driving the animal into the forest, beat him to death. Whitefeather wished to reward his friends, so he invited them to a buffalo hunt to take place in 4 days' time, and he bade them prepare many arrows. To make ready for them, he cut a buffalo robe into strips, which he sewed upon the prairie. On the day appointed, the warriors found that these shreds of skin had grown into a large herd of buffaloes. They killed as many as they pleased, for Whitefeather tipped each arrow with magic, so that none missed their aim. A grand feast followed in the honor of Whitefeather's triumph over the giants and of his marriage with Crystal Stone. The end. How about that one?
Very good. Very good. I'm glad we did the second part. Or you did.
Yeah, it wasn't too long.
No.
And do you remember hearing that before?
No, actually not. I usually got a pretty good ear for that. So, nope.
Well,
it sounded like some of the other ones, but it was a lot different. Put it that way.
Well, I remember the boy being hidden by his grandfather. I remember the giants. I remember that they had cheated. Mm-hmm. Remember that he had been given something to cheat him back. So, I mean, the story to me, and I think it might have come out of the book, our original book that we started with. I think it came out of there. So, but anyway, in a lot of ways, it was like word for word. So I try to read the stories before we do the show, so that I'm used to the what the story's about.
Yep.
And I can sort of get a cadence for it,
Mm-hmm.
I try to liven the story up, using my voice.
It works good. It works good.
I've had a lot of practice. How many shows is this now? 144?
145.
Oh, it is 145?
145, yeah.
Holy mackerel. Holy mackerel there, Andy. I'm pulling cards. We got time for a couple?
Yeah. Yeah, we got time.
Tough, it's my birthday still. For a minute.
Right.
For one more minute, and then it's tomorrow. Well, I got 3 cards, and we can do them pretty quick.
All right. What do you got?
I can't believe it. One of my favorites, but upside down, is the deer. And, that's innocence. Number 4. We haven't had bear in a long time.
No.
Deer is gentleness. And so the general story of deer is that deer was headed up sacred mountain to have a chit chat with the great spirit, and there was a huge, ugly, nasty critter, just a demon, who tried its best to scare deer, and deer wouldn't have it. She said to the demon, "Please let me pass. I'm on the way to see great spirit." So deer managed to basically shrink the demon's heart to the size of a walnut. And so that the path to Sacred Mountain is open through the gentleness of deer. So that if you have fear, the path to Sacred Mountain is open. Remember that part. Now it's in the contrary because it's upside down. Deer in the contrary position indicates that you are courting your fears by fighting the internal demons of negative ideas. Think about that one. I got to repeat that. Deer in the contrary position indicates that you are courting your fear by fighting the internal demons of negative ideas. This is a clue to you that force is not always the best method. You may not be willing to love yourself enough to feel your fears and to let them go. You may not be willing to love yourself enough to feel your fears and let them go. You may be projecting your fears onto others. It may be also that others whom you fear, reminding you of a time when you reacted to life in such much the same manner, in fear. At any rate, love is the key. The only true balance to power is the love and compassion of deer. Be willing to find things to love about yourself and others, and your demons will melt away. Your fears cannot exist in the same place that love and gentleness abide. I love that sentence. Your fears cannot exist in the same place that love and gentleness abide. Now, the next card up is Armadillo, number 28, and that's about rolling up in a ball and protecting yourself. 28. I'm almost there. We haven't had armadillo in a little while, and it's right side up. Armadillo is boundaries. Armadillo wears its armor on its back. Its medicine is a part of its body. Its boundaries of safety are a part of its total being. Armadillo can roll into a ball and never be penetrated by enemies. What a gift it is to have your boundaries so that harmful words or intentions just roll off. Your lesson is in setting up what you are willing to experience. In other words, it's up to you to figure out how much you are willing to accept, how much pain, how much, verbal abuse. If you do not wish to experience feeling invaded, just call on armadillo medicine. A clue to how to proceed is, let me skip down. If armadillo has waddled into the cards you chose It is time to define your space. Now, so the deer is talking about internal fears, and armadillo is asking you to define your space. You may have been too willing to let your home become a bus station. You may find that you cannot say no to others, even though you know that it's going to be a pain. How you react in any circumstance has to do with your ability to be objective. So don't overreact. Remember, dear, the last thing it said was love, basically can conquer all. So, um, how you react to circumstances. So, if you react to circumstances with love and honor, you cannot be objective if you cannot tell where the other person's personality stops and where yours begins. If you have no boundaries, you are like a sponge. It will seem as if all the feelings in a room full of people must be yours. Ask yourself if you are really feeling depressed or if this feeling actually belongs to other people that you're speaking to. And in this day and time, there's a lot of fear out there, and we got to do a lot of internals, and we need to set our own boundaries. And so, if we're acting like a sponge all the time, we can feel a whole room full of stuff that may not be our feelings. We're picking up something else. And now Bat is the third card, and it's rebirth. So Bat embraces the idea of a shamanic death. The ritual death of the healer is steeped in secrets and highly involved. So, but basically, what it means is you have to push away all of your human nature and allow yourself to absorb the energy from the creator. The basic idea of ancient initiations was to break down all the former notions of self that were held by the shaman to be. This ritual is very similar to a night of fear practiced by natives of Turtle Island. If Bat has appeared in your cards today, it symbolizes the need for a ritualistic death of some way of life that no longer suits your new growth pattern. This can mean a time of letting go of old habits and of assuming the position in life that prepares you for rebirth, or in some cases, an initiation. In every case, Bat signals rebirth of some part of yourself or the death of old patterns from yourself. If you resist your destiny, it can be a long, drawn out, painful death. The universe is always asking you to grow and become your future. I got to repeat that. The universe is always asking you to grow and become your future. To do so, you must die the shaman's death. So, rebirth. We've got deer saying, hey, you can get there. Armadillo's like, set your boundaries. And Bat is talking about rebirth. And we are definitely right now in a time of rebirth. So choose your boundaries. Remember love and gentleness from the deer. Not a bad little bit of message there. Kind of simple.
Yep.
But powerful, I think. Choose your boundaries. And with the love card thing, You know, there are a lot of people who are trying to convince you of something else. So you gotta feel it inside, you know,
Mm-hmm. Sure
and
do.
don't let people scare you into it. That's the fear thing. Don't let people scare you into something. So I love y'all. Thank you. I appreciate all my birthday wishes,
Mm-hmm.
and
You got a
I
show
will.
birthday show tonight?
Yeah, I think I'll wait for a little while. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thanks to everybody who came tonight. We had a lot of people, some new ones in here. Mary Wins is in the house. F. Kitty. Richard the Red. Hey, there you go. Richard's here. Witchy Moon. Let's see who else is here. We had a lot of people in the house tonight. Chloe is in the house, and Mary Wins, Elderberry, Sherry is here, was here. I think she's still here. Sherry is in the house. We also had, I'm going to miss a few people. Tales Told in the Dark. Thank you for coming tonight. Hello, hello. Just going through here. Lucky Stone. Lucky Stone is listening, I'm sure. Pearl Jones. And she's here. She come to visit. Thank you, Savage Lee, Susie Q. She had to go to bed. She's getting a little tired, she said. So, thank you for being here, Saturnian Sun. Thank you for showing up tonight. Very nice of y'all to show up tonight and visit us. Daniel R. Thank you for being here tonight. Off the Hook. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I'm sure I probably did somewhere because there was a guy from Brazil, and I can't remember where or who his name was. But anyway, thank you for coming tonight.
What a crowd!
Yeah, we had a pretty good crowd. Seeker of Truth too. Thank you for being here tonight too. Sorry, see, I almost missed you there. And a Lackey. Wagner, that's who it was. Thank you for coming in. Please give me a thumbs up, share it, like it. Either way, it's all good. Thank you, and leave a comment and the thing. We're trying to boost our stuff. We're over the 1,000 mark now, so it's all good. We should be, really trucking on with a lot of people, getting this out there. We've been having a lot of views with the Native Americans. My best watch show, believe it or not. And it's all thanks to you. And we make a pretty good team, don't we?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. 145 shows, almost in a row, you know? And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here every week with you. And as always, I'm going to get mine in here. I continue to pray that each and every day, each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the many blessings from the universe. And I thank you all for my birthday wishes tonight, even though it's tomorrow.
Hey, it's still tonight in my zone.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Central Time Zone. Yeah, that's true.
That's
so
right.
I can still have a birthday. I'll go eat some of my pudding that my friends brought me.
I like it. Oh yeah. Well, anyway, thank you everybody. And as Mary Wynn says, a love one, and there you go. Chloe says much favor and good night, everyone. Thank you. Remember, everybody, go out and do something nice for yourself and for somebody else. It's very rewarding, and it just helps you be a better person. This is a time for giving and sharing and learning, and just be more than you are. You're part of everyone, and then everyone is a part of you. We're all the same, no matter what our skin color is or our nationality. We're still human, and we're people living on this planet. So the most important thing is to be the frequency you want to receive, everybody. Love you all. Peace, everybody.
Cheers.